I mean, it blows my mind when I think about, I just go back a couple of years in my own perspective and looking at things. And I would think to myself, if somebody mentioned, let's just say the 1890s or the 1880s, let's just say the 1890s, around the time of Tesla, the association I would have made in my mind is that basically everybody was still riding around in a horse and buggy, and everything was super, super primitive in terms of technology. And that we've advanced light years since then. And in a sense, I'd be right. But the more I've learned, the more I've come to discover that this technology, folks, anti-grav, time travel, teleportation, telepathy, I mean, these things go back to that era and even before that era. These technologies have existed. Free energy. And I've talked about a lot of these, I've talked a lot about Tesla, talked a lot about Jetson White's videos on him, which are amazing. But the point is that these technologies have existed for such a long time that we don't even begin to understand now. I mean, we're going to understand. But we're going to be introduced to technologies that we are truly going to be, it's going to be like light years. It almost reminds me of in the Star Trek, or was it Star Wars? I can't remember which one it was, but when they went light speed, I think it was Star Wars. Yeah, the Millennium Falcon. And they would put it in light speed, like all the lights would just kind of come flashing toward them as they shot off into space. I mean, that's kind of the way I see it metaphorically. I mean, that's what's going to happen to humanity. We have already been gifted and given by God through benevolent non-terrestrials who are helping us all of the blueprints to be able to completely not only save our species, but take our species to levels that we can't even begin to wrap our brains around at the current moment. I mean, Gene talks about how the elite, the cabal, live in an opulence that we can't even understand. And I firmly believe that. But the technology, which he also points out that we've been given by our friends upstairs, who I believe are, giving us this, I believe, again, it's all directed. And there are folks out there who are going to say that, any type of non-terrestrial beings are evil and demonic. There are going to be people who are going to cling to that. And that's fine. If that's your perspective, I'm not going to debate you on that. It's not mine. I believe very, very firmly that non-terrestrial life exists. I don't even think it's a question of opinion anymore, quite honestly. I mean, and I also believe, probably more importantly, as I've stated many times, that of the existence of good and evil in every single walk of life and every faction of life, there is the existence of good and there is the existence of evil. And I believe that even in these groups, even in a lot of these non-terrestrial groups that we talk about, like let's just say the reptilians, for example, they get referenced most frequently, even though they're only one group out of God knows how many. But the immediate association, of course, for us, and rightly so, I think, at this point in time, based on what we know, is that, you hear the reptilians, we think immediately of these evil, demonic beings and creatures who have hijacked our world, and we would be correct. However, there are positive reptilian beings, just like insectoid creatures. It's hard to imagine. First of all, I think for some people, it's hard to imagine the insectoid type creatures that basically are as tall or taller in form, physical form, than a human being, but are actually insect-like creatures that can communicate in similar ways as human beings. It's hard for some people to even imagine a creature like that existing. And if they do imagine a creature like that existing, immediately the association would be that would be an evil creature. But again, from my research, from what I'm told, again, there's always that there are many that are evil, but there are also those that are not. And our whole perspective on the universe is going to completely radically change. And there are going to be people who, are going to have that opinion that anything that's not human is automatically evil, but I think they're also going to be ultimately proven wrong. They're going to be introduced to the reality and the truth of what exists. I just think to myself how amazing it's going to be when that day comes. And I believe that, God has ordained all of this. I believe God is the source of all things. And that we have finally reached a point in our humanity, in our experience, after our experience in Atlantis, before, we learned our lesson. And we had higher density beings try to warn us that we needed to learn how to master the ego mind, because at that point in time, we studied that era. We were at such a higher density that nobody really even imagined or could consider the possibility of wronging another. But in some ways, we were like the dodo bird. We had no defense against evil when it finally came to invade our realm, which it did. And it took a long, long time for humanity to get to the point where we finally are now, where we're on the verge of this massive breakthrough, where we collectively understand what happened to us, who we really are, where we really came from, what we've been through, and why. And what a journey it's been. And I mean, in some ways, I think it feels like a curse to be alive right now because it's such a difficult, dark period that we're living through. I mean, previous generations, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, folks who passed away, let's just say within the past few decades, that how close they came to being a part of this themselves and never actually made it. Or even, heck, even people that, passed away very recently who were aware, at least at some level, and awake at some level, and knew what was happening in the world, in the universe. But at the same time, you go back 20, 30 years, the world was a very, very different place, seemingly, than it is now. This awakening process has accelerated massively. It was really, I think, going at a snail's pace compared to where we are now. Everything is just in hyperdrive. And this happened the minute Trump came down that escalator and made himself a candidate for president and started making speeches and started speaking truth and common sense to the American people and showing where his allegiance was. The minute that started to happen, I think that's when we really shot off into the night in terms of the awakening of the American people. Because finally we had a leader. Finally we had someone who we could tell. Even though of course, there are always people out there who are going to say, well, Trump's an elitist. He's really cabal. He's really this. He's really that. He's in on the whole thing. And I've heard so many things about Trump, none of which I believe, because everything that Trump has done has been contrary to their agenda. Other than the thing that goes in your arm. And that is a major sticking point for a lot of people, no pun intended. But I'm not going to get into that today because that's just a whole different conversation in and of itself. But finally, we had a leader who people could identify as someone who really cared about the American people, who was putting Americans first for once and not trying to sell us this bag of goods, to sell us this, this screw job, as Alex Jones likes to say. And, people got to the point where it was just one thing it was just one phony after another. And then along came Trump. And I think what Trump did inside the hearts of so many people is that he restored faith that there was a way out of this hellhole that we've been living in, of this trap. And finally we had someone come forward who was in a position where he could actually challenge and win. He could challenge the system, the establishment. And I know so many people, sing the praises of Trump, but, when I think about it, it really is amazing what that man gave up. He had everything. Everything that anyone could ever want in terms of, material goods, in terms of a lifestyle, in terms of notoriety. And I mean, he gave all of that up to be the most demonized man in the world, the most targeted man in the world. It's not just that they've said bad things about Trump. They've been trying to kill Trump God knows how many times. I'm sure we'll probably find out someday how many assassination attempts he survived. And he knew going into all this, he knew full well what he was getting himself into and why he was doing it. He's a man of God. He's a God-fearing man. And people can say what they want about, sometimes I talk about being God-fearing. And I get comments like, well, why would you fear God? And, people have their own viewpoints, and I get that. Some people view God as, as being impossible, an entity that's impossible to fear. That's fine if that's your perspective. That's not mine. I tend to agree with 107 that, God in his anger, you would run to hell to get away from God in his anger. See, I believe that all of us and all of our emotions, that I've been talking a lot about lately, we're created. We can't never forget that we're created in the image of God. And that's not just the physical image of God. We're created with the raw materials of God's character inside of us. And that is our emotions, our responses to what we experience in this world. And God's people, because he controls our hearts, we have God's righteousness encoded in our DNA, in our heart. That's why the system can never take us out. Maybe it could take our life, but it could never take our spirit, our soul. It could never remove our heart, the connection that our heart has to God. It could never do that. It's like in Braveheart where he says they can take our lives. They may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom. It's in the same way. And that's why we feel the way we do. That's why those words resonate with every single member of my audience. I know that every single one of you, you would rather die than live under tyranny. You'd pay the ultimate price willingly to secure freedom, not just for us, but for the future, for future generations. That's how this country was born, folks. Because of people who stood up against tyranny. That's who we are. That's where we come from. That's encoded in our genetic memory, our DNA that's being awakened now. You think it's a mistake that all of these people are driving around in their trucks with massive American flags waving? And then all these people are wearing their patriotism all over the world for everybody to see, draped all over them, all over their sleeves. They're wearing their hearts. You think it's a mistake? No. What's happening is the genetic memory is emerging. It's coming to the surface. People are understanding now what's at stake. They understand that their freedom is under attack. And they're summoning the spirits of their ancestors are coming to the surface. The people who fought for freedom. The same way right now, of course, and we hope it'll stay this way, that the fight is digital, is informational. Yes, it's also physical in so many ways, but not involving us. And we hope that it stays that way. But we have done an amazing service to humanity, and we've fought in a way that I think is completely unprecedented. Wars up until this point in history have always been fought primarily on a physical level, on a physical plane, on a three-dimensional plane, I think you might even say. And I think we're the first generation of warriors of this fifth-dimensional informational warfare, this asymmetric warfare that enables all of us. The beauty of it is enables all of us who have the will to fight, to be able to fight on this digital battlefield. We don't have to go through boot camp or basic training and learn how to fire a weapon. All we have to do is have courage to speak the truth and not back down. And we've done that. And we're the first generation to do that amidst an environment where we were really against all odds. Against all odds, people of the world came together amidst the backdrop of the cabal trying to engineer our destruction of each other. We found a way to transcend that, to come together. What an amazing experience. What a special thing to be a part of. Okay, folks, hopefully you enjoyed this coffee chat this morning. I'm going to leave you here with the hopes that you did. Please let me know how you responded in the comments. As always, I love reading your comments, and thank you so much in advance for all of your kind words. So many of you have such beautiful souls, and I am hoping that one day in the future, hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll be able to meet on a physical level. But until then, we'll continue to communicate as we do and continue to build this digital family and this special bond that we share with each other that I cherish more and more every single day. So thank you, all of you, for your support. Please support the channel in any way you can. Make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons and share the links with like-minded folks. Help me to expand the reach of the show, which you've been doing. Please accept my gratitude for everything. God bless. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Patriot out.